completely different. It's always a different problem. There's always a different scenario. There's a different budget we're working with. People have different personalities and different wants and needs for what they're looking for. And so through that, we implement lots of different types of backup stuff. So we've got people that are backing up from a computer to another computer. We've got people that want to take their hard drive out of their computer. The hard drive is the device inside the computer that holds all of your data and your documents and your programs and stuff. They're taking it out and bringing it to another location. We've got people backing up on USB drives and external drives in the cloud, and so that we see a lot of different needs that people want to have, and we've got a lot of different things that we recommend to people depending on what it is that they're looking for. We also, as a company, we provide a managed backup solution. So we have some companies that have come to us and said, we don't want to deal with backup, we just want it to happen. And so we take care of that backup. We make sure that it's being backed up on site and in the cloud, and then we manage it, make sure that the logs are correct, that it's backing up. We test it out and do all types of stuff. So we know a little bit about backup, which is kind of why we're here today talking about it. And I went the right way, good. So why do we need backup? We need backup because life happens. Things get stolen. People get laptops stolen out of their cars all the time. People have people break into their house and they just take everything technology looking that they can find in the house and they'll take that. We've had clients that have gotten robbed and they've just been robbed at knife point and they've said, you know, give me your phone, give me your wallet, and they just take the electronics off of them. And so things happen. We lose things. People lose things all the time. There's damage that's done. People kick over their computers on the floor because they're using them like foot stands. People spill things on their computers. They put laptops in backpacks and they forget and they maybe sit down against the backpack or throw it on the ground. Kids happen. Young people don't seem to respect technology very well, and so they happen a lot as the damage is caused by them. We drop phones in toilets and things, and so there's a lot of stuff that happens to the technology that we have that just seems to damage it. The age of technology, just because it's working, if it's 10 years old, it might be time to start replacing it. We don't want to use it until it's totally broken, because then it's harder to get that stuff back out and get it onto a new device. And so technology does get to a certain age, whether it's a phone or a PC or a tablet or whatever it is, an external drive, we do want to replace that at a certain time. Just like we're getting older and things need replacing, and we feel it more. The computers are getting older and they feel it more and they need some things being replaced every once in a while. So fire, flood, electrical events, natural disasters, I mean, these things happen. Fires happen, and unless you're on your way out, you're also thinking about your favorite computer in the other room and you want to grab that under your arm while you're running under your house. I don't know, I wouldn't be thinking about that. I'd be grabbing my kids and getting out. But those kind of things happen. Floods happen, electrical events. We had a client in Batavia a couple of years ago. They own a hair salon and a hair cutting and a salon and like a tanning thing, and like it's a whole big thing there. The city of Batavia was doing some work electrically, and they messed up, and they fried everything in this lady's business. Her tanning beds, her hair dryers, all of their computers were fried. Everything just and everything was gone. It was horrible. So the stuff just happens, and so you have to be ready for that. But what's most important about why we're backing up is because we have things. The reason that we're backing up is because we have things that we maybe can't replace, or that we wouldn't want to take the time to replace, because maybe you've got all your financials for the last few years in a spreadsheet on your computer, and you probably could go back through all your statements and do that again, but wow, that would take a lot of time. And you might have pictures of kids or grandkids or family members, and there's people that have passed that you have pictures of, and events and different things like that. And all these things are really valuable to us, and we want to hold on to them. And so if the computer crashes suddenly or loses its data, or it's in a fire or gets stolen, that can be quite an emotional thing for people these days, because we have a lot of the stuff that we've collected, and a lot of it is digital now. And so we're sticking all this digital stuff into our computers. And so that's really why we need to back up, is that we have things that are important to us, that if they were to go away, we'd be like, not happy about that. So I want to talk about where we're storing things. So this is some more educational wise, but it kind of helps you to understand why it is important to back up. So right now, when you buy a PC, or like a tower computer, or you buy a laptop, inside of it, there's a spinning drive. So in this laptop over here, and you might have an SSD, but in most laptops and PCs that you buy nowadays, there's what's called a spinning drive. It's a hard disk drive. They come in different sizes. There's 2.5 and 3.5, and there's some other weird ones too. But this is kind of the type of storage that we've used over the years. And so it's not much different than the first storage stuff that was done, where it's a spinning thing and there's data being written onto it. And so the way that these devices work, if you think of like kind of records stacked on top of each other, and in between all of these records, there's like needles that would read a record. It's very similar to the way that a hard drive works, except the records are called platters. And these needles have heads, they call them heads on the end, that read and write data. And so for every platter, for every record that's there, there's a needle on top, reading and writing data to the top of the platter, and there's a needle underneath that record that's reading the bottom, it's reading and writing data there. And so these needles are all on an arm. So like, let's imagine this is the record going around. The needles are on an arm that'll bring it closer to the middle of the record and further away, just like the arm on a record player. And so this is the technology that we're dealing with in our stuff. And so this gets more complicated though, because it used to be that you'd have a single record in there and a couple heads that would be on an arm, so they'd be reading and writing. But as our data needs have gone up, storage has gone up. And so companies have found more and more interesting ways to just pack data onto these records. And the more data they pack, the more important it is that things are read and written in a very exact way. And so nowadays, these drives, if you have a fast drive, a fast spinning drive, it can read up data maybe up to 150 megabytes a second. And for some of you guys, you might not know what that is, but that's okay. It's an okay speed. Like I said, it's the default data. If you get a PC, a laptop, even businesses that get servers, their servers will most likely have spinning drives in them. Because they're spinning and because it's mechanical and because it needs to be so specific in where it's writing and I mean, you're talking about, there's, microns of I don't know, microns of an inch. I don't know what a micron would be. Very small little distances. This thing needs to be exactly accurate. It's susceptible to vibration and noise. So when you're bumping your laptop around or when you're kicking your tower on the ground, there's been some funny like YouTube videos lately of people, their server's going and they've got a monitor next to it that's monitoring how fast that server is reading and writing data, and they'll scream at the server and the reading and writing actually goes down. Because these things are happening on such a minute level, sound waves are enough to actually affect the way that it's able to read and write. So the great thing about hard disk drives are they're cheap. You can get 2 terabytes, which is usually more than enough room for anybody, for about $55. And so you can get very large sizes. You can get an 8 terabyte hard drive probably for about $170. They're not very expensive. And so that's what we're dealing with there. This is what a hard disk drive looks like. And so up in this top left corner here, this is the record that I'm talking about. And so these things are probably, they're about maybe the size of half of a sheet of a 3.5 inch hard disk drive is probably about half it's not even quite that big, but it's about half the size of a sheet of paper. It's not very big. So it's a 3.5 inch, refers to the diagonal of how big it is. But there's your record, and you can kind of see that there's that arm that kind of goes into a yellow thing at the top. That's the arm, and that comes down and reads across the platters. So that's the record is the platter. And in the bottom right corner, you can kind of see a side view. This specific hard drive has 2 records, and you can see there's needles on top of it, a needle below it, and then on the second record platter, there's a needle on top and below. Hopefully this is somewhat interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen the inside of a hard drive before. And so these platters, so hard drives come in different storage sizes, but they also come in different speeds. And so obviously the faster your hard drive is spinning around, the quicker it can get data to that head to be able to be read. And so hard drives on the very slowest side are going about 5,400 RPM. And on the very fast side, in a fast server, we put hard drives in that are 14K or 15K. They're going to be 14,000 revolutions per minute or 15,000 revolutions per minute. And this is all happening while these arms, while these heads, the needles on the record, they're traveling nanometers away from the surface. This is unbelievable. So a human hair is 100,000 nanometers thick. And these things are traveling next to something going up to 14,000 revolutions per minute at just a few nanometers, not as thick as of a hair. Like, I don't know what that is. That's very, very less than a thickness of a hair. So there's like, it's not how long is your hard drive going to last, but how in the heck is this even happening to begin with? I don't even know, because it's just like, looks like a recipe for disaster. So this is what's going on inside of your laptop. So now the next time that you shake your laptop while it's running, think about all these things happening and just what a recipe for disaster it is. So we have something new though that's come out. So in the last, I would probably say maybe 10 years ago, they started showing up, but they were super expensive. And nowadays they become more mainstream. There's these things called solid state drives, or SSDs. And so for a PC, a laptop, and a server, an SSD comes in, it's usually a 2.5-inch thing. It's probably about the size of a cell phone, maybe not quite as long. And then there's also different types of solid state drives. So basically what a solid state drive is it's memory chips. So it's just straight up memory sitting on a chip, and there's no moving parts. Because there's no moving parts, heat is usually not a big issue because there's not all these moving and rotating and things going around. So it doesn't heat up as much. They're not as heavy. They're way lighter than a hard drive. They're a lot faster. So if you remember, our spinning drives were about 150 megabytes a second. Solid state drives right now, we just built a machine for a client that does music editing, and we put a solid state drive in there. It's an M2 drive. It reads up to 3,500 megabytes a second, which is a very big difference from 150 megabytes a second. Normal SSDs that you buy, though, if you just start swapping something out in your laptop or something, they read more on the lines of about 500 to 800 megabytes a second, depending on which one you're doing, but it's still quite a jump up in speed. If you take your laptop and we take your drive out and just switch it out for a solid state drive, it'll cost about maybe $100, $200, but there is no doubt that you will feel a speed difference when it's done. And so it's been a really good advancement in technology. Also, because there's moving parts, these are things that we put into machines that are maybe going in a truck. So we've got plumbers that are running around, or policemen that are going around. There's a lot of bumps and stuff going on, and they're doing this while they're driving. They need to be, or salesmen that are going in and out of businesses and they got their laptop all the time. A drop is not going to hurt a solid state drive. It might break your screen, but it's not going to hurt that as much. Wiggling around and moving around is not going to be as big of a deal either, and you get a faster speed out of it. So there's a lot of advantages to solid state drives. So no moving parts, it's very fast read speeds, not susceptible to bumps. It's starting to appear in laptops and PCs. There are laptops now that you can get with solid state drives in them. You can also get some PCs now with solid state drives because the prices have come down enough that it's being offered now in just regular consumer type of stuff, right from Dell or from HP or from Lenovo or whatever it is you're getting a computer from. That's usually an option now that'll come with it, and some higher end stuff they just come with them now. So they're smaller in size. But they're more expensive, so you don't get as much space. So if you remember from our hard disk drive, you can get about a 2 terabyte drive for about $55. A 2 terabyte drive in an SSD, about the cheapest that I saw out there was about $450. So it's quite a bit more expensive. You don't need to get 2 terabytes of space. We normally put in 256 gigs of space, which runs closer to around $90. But you can see that the cost per megabyte, let's say, is getting more expensive as we go up into these faster drives. So to note too, so this is what's in your cell phone. This is what's in your tablet. They don't have spinning drives in them. They've got solid state drives. They just have memory chips basically that are soldered into them. And so that's why if you held it up to your ear, you wouldn't hear anything whirring around in there. And so that's why they also don't need fans or anything like that, because they're not heating up very much. Some of the first iPods that were a little bit thicker, if you had an iPod, probably would be about 10 years ago, they were thicker and they actually had spinning drives in them. So dropping that, it was not a good idea for something that you'd be running with or walking around with, but dropping that or wiggling it hard or something like that could break the drive or could really cause some errors in the drive. This is a solid state drive. So on the top section, that's just a normal SSD drive. That's what we would normally put into a computer or a laptop. If you get a computer or laptop with an SSD, that's very most likely what it is. That's what it looks like from the outside. And then to the right, that's what it looks like inside. It's basically just memory chips on the motherboard. And so there's no moving parts, and they're very different than the spinning drives that I was showing you pictures of. And then at the bottom, this is an M2 card. This is more of the newer technology with solid state. Still the same concept. There's still memory chips that are on board, and then that's providing you storage. So they have a maximum amount of writes. So one of the downsides of solid state drives, and one of the things that kept people from getting them when they were first coming out, is that they do have a maximum amount of times that you can write to them. because the memory cards actually kind of wear out over time. And so it's very smart about making sure that it spreads that amongst everything correctly. And nowadays, it's not something that you need to worry about too much because now they've increased the technology and increased the resilience of these chips to the point where the amount of times that you can write to it really don't matter. You're not going to hit that on a normal machine anymore. So the other problem is that when you have a spinning drive that starts failing, you might have had a computer at one point in time that was having hard drive errors, and you might hear like a click, click, or you hear like some noises coming from it. And it's kind of saying, I'm sick. You should be replacing me very soon. Call a doctor. Things aren't going very well. And so it might have some problems, but it might still be able to retrieve data, it might still be able to write data, but it starts going really slow. And so the great thing about spinning drives is they fail kind of slowly. They start having some signs of wear and tear, like us. But solid state drives, it's like one day like, ooh, I'm a solid state drive, I'm working great. And the next day it's like, they're just dead, they're gone. And so there is no signs, because it's all memory chips and motherboards, there's not something that's going to slowly start to wear out because there's nothing mechanical that's wearing out. It's just working or it's not. And so that's some of the downsides of it, is that there's really no, there's not a sign that it's starting to go bad. It just goes bad and then you just have to deal with it. And so it can be, you definitely want to make sure you've got a good backup if you've got a solid state drive. You want to make sure you have a good backup if you have a spinning drive. But we, on a regular basis, we'll get spinning drives in that we're able to retrieve data from that they're on their way out the door. Solid state drive, you're pretty much done. Hybrid drive. So I just want to mention there are things that have become between these things. So the problem is that with a spinning drive, you can get a lot of storage space for cheap. And with a solid state drive, this a lot of storage costs a lot of money. And so what manufacturers have done is they've said, well, let's try to bring these two things together so we can still offer some big sizes for cheap, but maybe add a little bit more price on and give them some of the speed that comes with an SSD. And so hybrid drives, all they really are is taking a spinning drive and a very, very small solid state drive and putting them together. And so what the concept is that on your computer, you might have 2 terabytes of storage, but you're probably only using 0.01% of that all the time. Like you're running Windows all the time, so the Windows files are constantly being used. You're running Word all the time. You're running, your web browser, whether that's Chrome or Internet Explorer or Edge or Firefox, whatever it is that you're using. That's constantly something that you're using, and then there's all this other junk that you never touch really on the computer. And there's a bunch of free space that you're not touching. And so what happens is that the solid state portion of these hybrid drives, it says, oh, this person's using this stuff quite a lot. I'm going to keep this in the very fast part, the solid state. And this other stuff they don't use that much, but if they start using it more, I'll move it into the solid state. So it's kind of smartly keeps all of the stuff that you're using most often in the very fast part, and then keeps all the rest of the stuff in the slower part, in the spinning part. So these are kind of nice. They give you a little bit of a speed boost with not a lot of money. We haven't had a lot of them fail, but I worry about them failing because now you've got the immediate failure of an SSD paired with a spinning drive. But when that SSD fails, depending on how they have it set up, I don't know that any of it's going to work at that point. It's kind of like when you start throwing VCRs and DVDs along with the TVs. It's kind of like when something breaks, the rest of it maybe not be good for anything. It doesn't really matter anymore. You got to throw the whole thing away. So I just want to let you guys know that there's these things out there. So backup. Now we can talk about the thing we're going to talk about. So I only have 3 more hours to go, so don't worry about it. We're getting to it. So backup. There's this concept in backup called 3-2-1 backup, and I don't remember what the name of the man is. It probably would have been smart for me to get that for you guys, but there's a guy that kind of came up with this concept. And the concept is that to have a good backup plan, you want to have 3 copies of your data. You want to have, across these 3 copies, you should be using 2 different types of devices or storage for these, and one of them should be off-site. And so this is kind of the rule. It's nice and easy. Everybody knows 3-2-1, so it's really easy to remember. So we're going to kind of dive into what this means. So 3 copies of data. So let's say that we've got, well, in this example, we have a Word document. So let's say that we have a Word document. And so we have a Word document on this beautiful blue, I don't know what that is, it might be an old iMac computer. And so that's on there, that's on your computer, you're using that. But this could just as easily be your phone or your tablet. So this is whatever device you have that data on, you have it on there, that's copy number 1. And so you want to have 2 other copies somewhere else. And so those 2 other copies might be, we've got a USB drive up there, that's an external drive. We've got a DVD, that's the cloud up there. Did you know the cloud was that size? You guys ever seen the cloud before? So you have 1 copy on the device that you're using, then you have 2 copies that you put somewhere else. 2 different types of storage. So when you're storing those copies, you can store them on anything else, but you don't want to put 3 copies on 3 different computers. And you don't want to have your main copy and 2 other copies on just USB drives. And so they're trying to get you to move it across multiple things for a couple different reasons. Some of the reasons is that some of the stuff that we store, we're not planning on accessing for a very long time. And so you might store it on a do you guys remember zip drives? Yeah. There's a lot of people that store stuff on zip drives. And nowadays they're like, oh, where do I buy a zip drive at? How do I get this stuff off of here? We have clients that come to us with stacks of 3.5-inch discs. My pastor just came to me last month and said, can you get these off of this? I don't have a 3.5-inch disc on anything that I own. And so I said, yeah, we've got something for that. So I was able to take it. So they're trying to get you to store it on different devices because we don't know how long you're storing it for. And you might throw it away in a shoebox or in a cupboard or in a cabinet or in a drawer or whatever. And then you pull it out later and you're like, oh, I wonder what's on here. But since then you've got a new computer, there's new technology, and it's like, I have nothing to read this anymore. So that's the reason why they want it to be on different types of storage devices. So you might have it on your computer, and you might decide to put a copy on your USB drive, and maybe you burn a copy onto a DVD also, and so then you've got it on different things. Or maybe you've got it on your computer and you've got it on 2 USB drives. Well, that's fine because you have it on 2 different types of devices. One is a computer, a hard drive, and one is a USB drive. Going the wrong way. There we go. Hey, there's our cloud again. Got a little bigger. Must be more data in it. So you have 1 copy that's offsite. And so we choose to use the cloud for offsite just because it's easy. And there's a lot of programs that'll make that very easy for you. But we have clients that say, because if you're storing data in the cloud, whether it's a backup service or whether it's a syncing service like Dropbox or OneDrive or iCloud Drive, that's all cloud-based stuff. So if you're putting it in there, you're probably paying a monthly fee for that. Unless you have a very small amount of data, you can sometimes use the free tier that they have. And so we have clients that are like, I don't want to pay a monthly cost. I just want to buy a big external drive, and I'm going to send it home with Sally every night. She's going to take that drive home in her purse, and that's our offsite copy. And so she's going to, we're going to have 5 drives maybe, and she's going to take one home every night, and then every morning she'll come back with another one, so that we always have some copies off-site, and we've got some stuff on-site. We have home clients that what they'll do is they'll make a backup onto an external drive, and they'll bring it over to one of their friends' house, somebody they trust, hopefully. So giving them all their data, but they'll make backups, and they'll just bring them somewhere else. They might put it in, if they've got an office that they work in, they might just bring it and put it there. That way it's somewhere else in case there's a fire or a theft or something weird like that. Their whole house is gone when they get home. It's like, okay, I've got my data over in here still, it's okay. So they've got a copy somewhere. We just like the cloud because it's easy and it's fairly cheap monthly. And so that's the one part of it. So we're doing 3 copies of that data. So you got 3 copies of that Word document across at least 2 different devices. And you've got one of those copies is not, like, hopefully all 3 copies aren't sitting next to your computer, because when the fire strikes or the thief comes in, they're going to take it all. And then it doesn't matter how many copies you've made, it's all gone. So another thing that should be mentioned in that too is that if you back up to an external drive, for instance, you want to maybe unplug that external drive, because if you get a virus that encrypts your entire machine, guess what? That drive is going to get encrypted also. That virus doesn't go, oh, no, we'll leave the backup alone. They were smart enough to back up. We're not going to touch that. We're just going to do this stuff. They want to take everything. So it's something to think about when you've got other devices that you're backing up to that are in the same exact location as the computer that you are backing up. So there are built-in backup programs. There's Windows has, in Windows 7 and below, there used to be a Windows image. It would make a full image of your computer onto an external drive or onto a network location. And then starting with Windows 8, they started this thing called file history. And what file history is they said, we don't need to back up all of this stuff because it doesn't matter. What really matters to them is their data. So file history, what that does is it backs up everything like in your documents, and your pictures, and your videos, and on your desktop, and your favorites, and those types of things. So it backs up some of the stuff that's probably the most important stuff to you, because at the end of the day, if your drive fails or if your laptop gets stolen, reinstalling Windows is not a big deal. And then we have to reinstall the programs that you have, but nowadays that's all tied to an account. So if you have Microsoft Office, for instance, that's tied to an email address and a password, and then you can just re-download it and put it back on. That's not the end of the world. The important stuff to you is that important stuff that you might cry about if it's gone because it got lost. Mac uses Time Machine, which is that pretty much backs up everything on your computer, and then it takes iterative copies over time too, just like file history in Windows, but Windows doesn't back up everything on your computer. And so there are some built-in stuff into your computer where you don't have to buy anything additional. You can use that. That'll let you back up onto an external drive. That'll let you back up onto a USB drive. Most of those will let you back up if you have something else on your network and you set it up correctly. You can back up onto that also. And so they do have some built-in solutions. These are some cloud backup providers. There are probably, I don't know, there's probably 100 or more cloud backup providers like there's anything else. But these are some of the ones that we hear about the most and that we interact with the most. You guys probably have heard of Mozy or Carbonite. You might have heard of Backblaze. SOS is another one that I saw. I was looking for a fourth one, and that seemed to be one that's more popular too. And there's different advantages of this. So you can see that Backblaze gives you unlimited, and a very big type of it, unlimited space. And so the price for Backblaze is $50 a year. So you pay $50 a year, and they just take care of everything. They give you 30 days of file revision. So when you save your Word doc, let's say that Word doc, you're working on that Word document again. For some reason, you just delete everything and then save it for some reason. You can go back to an old version, and so that's what the versions are. Is how far backwards can I go? So when I realized that I made a wrong calculation in my spreadsheet, but I saved it, and then I made more changes and I saved it, that's a problem, because how do I get back to the thing before I mess the whole thing up? That's the file version side of things. And so different backup things do have different types of versions that they do. So Backblaze gives you 30 days. Mozy is a little bit more expensive. They have plans that go anywhere from 50 gigabytes to 125 gigabytes. They actually go more than 125, but then it's just like an amount per, I didn't want to get into too much fine type. So 50 gigabytes is $66 and 125 gigabytes is $110. Carbonite gives you unlimited space. That's $72 a year, and they have 90 days of file revisions. The one thing I don't like about Carbonite is they don't automatically back up your videos. And this is just Carbonite being silly. They don't want your big videos coming up onto their servers unless you go and specifically choose each one of your videos and say back it up. So my advice, because you're here for my advice possibly, is we really like Backblaze. I don't get money from Backblaze. Backblaze is a really cool company. They've been growing for a long, long time. They're a very well-known company, and they don't even ask you what to back up. The reason I like Backblaze is it's just there's no configuration done. You install it, and it says, I don't care what you say, I'm backing up everything on your computer, and it just backs up everything. And so you don't have to go, oh, I forgot to back up that spreadsheet that's in this weird place. It's not in the documents folder. Or, oh, I didn't know that my bookmarks for Chrome are like 8 folders deep into my user folder. I didn't know about that. So it just backs up everything, and that way you don't have to worry about it. And that's why we like it, and it's cheap. It's $50 a year for a computer, and so we like it. So if you were to ask me what I would recommend for just the simple thing, just install it, let it go, and forget it. We really like Backblaze for that. But there are other options that have advantages and disadvantages to them. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of other ones. So you might have John's Handy Backup installed on your computer, and you might love it. Stay with it. If it's working for you, just stay with it. The big things are is to understand, though, what it's doing. Make sure that it's backing up what it is that you need. So yeah, I guess I would say that when it comes to whatever backup program that you're using, you want to make sure that it's don't just assume that it's doing everything correctly. You should be able to take a look at it and make sure that it's backing up your documents. There's backup programs that we've seen people have installed, and it's not backing up anything. And because it's not backing up everything, anything at all, it gives you a nice green check mark saying everything you want backed up is backed up. Well, that's because there's nothing that you chose. And there's some of these things that it's just not, it's just very weird. We go, and I can't even tell you how many businesses that we go into that say, oh yeah, we're backing up. And then we look, and yeah, they were backing up whatever they had at the time that they set that back up 5 years ago. But since then, they've created so many extra folders and programs, and they never added them to the backup. And so you want to just make sure that it's backing up what it should be backing up. And I think the Computer Club can probably help you guys out with that. And so that's something that any kind of knowledgeable person should be able to open it. And hopefully it's user-friendly enough that it'll say, I'm backing up these things. And if you want to back up this, just put a check mark next to it. Yes. We have phones. And so I said iPhone here. I looked afterwards and why say iPhone? It's iOS. So whether you're using an Apple operating system, so whether that's an iPhone or that's a tablet, what are Apple's tablets called? iPad. Thank you. Just like, and my mind went there for a second. So yeah, whether you have an iPad or an iPhone, or whether you've got an Android phone, there are other types of ones out there, but they have different types of solutions, and so I don't want to get into all of them. The most popular phones are probably an iOS phone, which is an Apple phone, or an Android phone, whether it's made by Samsung or John's backup maybe made a phone and put Android on it. We really like for Android and for iPhone, Google has this Google Photos app. You install it, and it says, do you want to back up your pictures? And you go, yes, I do. And it just happens. And so as long as you have a Google account, and if you don't, it's absolutely free to get a Google account. What it will do is that as you're taking pictures, it will back them up into the cloud. And by default, I believe, it only does it when you're on Wi-Fi too, so it's not using up your data, which is good. It will only back up to a certain level of picture, but it's a pretty big level. And since this is just a backup, there's a certain amount of megapixels. So a picture, depending on the camera you're taking with it, depending on the camera that you're taking the picture with, you have a certain quality of the picture, let's say. Google will only back up to a certain quality, but it's a pretty nice quality. Like unless you're blowing it up to a poster on a billboard, you're probably not going to notice the difference in quality. And it backs up your videos too, and it backs up your videos at a really nice quality. It backs them up, I think, at 1080p, that's HD quality. If you lose your phone in the toilet, you're going to be happy there's something there at all, and 1080 is plenty good for that. And so we really like it for this because it doesn't charge you to do that. There's no space being used if you want to just let Google back it up that way. So you can back up 1 billion photos to their service. It all happens in the background. And you don't have to do anything. Just when you get connected to Wi-Fi, it goes, oh, I'm on Wi-Fi. I'm going to start backing up now. And it just starts backing up all your stuff online. And so you don't have to do anything to do that, which is really nice. So it's a nice, cheap, easy solution. It's free to get a Google account if you don't already have one. And then it's in this account. Now, I should say, if you do sign up for a Google account, please write down your email address and password that you signed up with on that Google account. Because when your phone was in the toilet, and then you go to someone later, you're like, oh, it's okay, I backed up all my photos online, and you say, what's your Google account? You can't be like, I have no idea what that is. Because Google, you can't just say, hey, Google, I've got an account with you, what's my account? They don't know who you are. They've got billions of users. So please write down that information somewhere. If it's your normal email address that you're using for Google, then you probably know it. But if it's not, write it down so that we can get it back on your new device. And so that's really cool. Some people also are using, if you have Dropbox, if that's a program that you have, if you have Dropbox on your phone, that'll also offer to back up your pictures. And OneDrive will back up your pictures, and iCloud will back up your pictures. These things, though, all have a very finite amount of space. So they've got a very small amount of space, and you will end up hitting a limit at some point in time, and unless you want to pay monthly for it. So we just, almost all of our clients that ask us about backing stuff up on their phone, we just say use Google Photos, it's all good. And the reason that photos is what I'm focusing so much on phones and tablets for is because the majority of you, what you're putting on your phones that you care about is your photos. Your contacts are usually getting synchronized with Google or with Apple, and your calendar is getting synchronized with Google and Apple. And so the really important things that we're putting lots of on our phones and devices is usually photos. So if you have a situation outside of that, then you may want to look into something else if you need to be backing it up. But the majority of us, that's going to be good. If you're looking to do a full backup of your phone, whether it's an iOS phone or an Android phone or tablet, iOS tablet or Android tablet, we don't really usually have people do that because as long as you're backing up your photos and your contacts and calendar are synchronizing, everything else is just an app. And so if you drop it in the toilet, you go to the store, you buy a new one, you sign in, and then it says, oh, here's all your apps. It re-downloads all your apps. So if you're in Candy Crush, you might lose what level you're on in Candy Crush. You might have to start back out at 0, and for some of you, you might be like, well, that's where I draw the line. Candy Crush does offer to back up your data into Facebook if you sign in with Facebook, though, so it'll save your levels for you. Don't worry. But if you are looking to fully back up your device, think about it. Like, do I really need to do this? Because a lot of people just go to it like, oh, I need to back this up. And it's like, well, what do you really need from there? And if all you need is your photos, you're backing those up. And if all you need is your contacts and your calendar, maybe, if you're even using that stuff, and that's being backed up with the cloud, you may not really need to worry about that too much. But if you do, and you've got an iOS device, whether it's a tablet or an iPhone, iTunes, if you have iTunes on your machine and you plug your device into your machine, it'll back up all your stuff for you. You're going to want to make sure that it's set to back up, but it'll back it up onto your computer. With an Android phone or tablet, it gets a lot more complicated. If it's a Samsung, they have their own app, and if it's a John's backup service that made their own little Android something or other, they may have an app, and if not, there's apps in the App Store, the Google Play Store, that you can use that will allow you will help you out with that. So it gets a little bit more complicated than I can probably go into here right now. Some things to consider. So if you are only backing up to a USB flash drive or external drive, a theft, power surge, ransomware, virus, etc. will take your backup too. So I was kind of talking about this. If you're only backing up to something plugged into your computer, when your computer gets fried from a surge, it might fry that thing too, and there goes your backup. If somebody comes and steals your computer and the USB drive you're backing up to is plugged into the computer, guess what? It's going for a ride. If there's a fire or anything weird like that that's going to ruin your device, if that thing is plugged in or sitting right next to it, or you're like, no, it's not plugged in, it's in the little container, my pen container right next to it. That might get hurt at the same time also. The thief might go, that looks valuable, and grab that also. So it's just something to think about. If you are making backups into a cloud provider, so if you're using CrashPlan, or not CrashPlan, but if you're using Backblaze or Carbonite or Mozy or something like that, if you've got the space for it, I would back up if you're using Dropbox or OneDrive or iCloud also, that's not a backup service, that's a synchronization service. And so if you are also doing backup onto an external drive or into the cloud, I would choose to back that stuff up also. Because when everything goes haywire and you lose everything, getting all of your stuff back from Dropbox or OneDrive or iCloud can sometimes be really hard to do or really tedious, where it takes hours of time to kind of roll back to the last version. And sometimes it's kind of just won't happen depending on the interface. And so it's good to back that stuff up also. Your backup media gets too old and needs to be replaced. We see people that they go out and they get a really expensive computer, probably too expensive. It's like, $2,000 computer, and they've got an external drive on it that's like 12 years old. And it's making noises. It's clicking when you turn it on. Your backup stuff, whether it's a USB drive or an external drive or whatever, you want to eventually replace that. It's not good until it's dead. You want to kind of keep up with it. So keep in mind that also needs to be replaced. That also it doesn't just last forever. And so if you have, I guess I should give you some timeline. So for an external drive, you probably want to, if your external drive is still running after like maybe 4 or 5 years, it might be time to replace that external drive. External drives have a much higher rate of failure than an internal drive. And I don't know if it's because the companies that make the drives just stick the worst drives in those, but external drives usually don't last very long. If you're hitting 4 or 5 years, it's time to start thinking about it. 6 and 7 years, you're pushing your luck. For a USB drive, we've all got those thumb drives. Some people, they get them in giveaways or they get them as prizes. You can pick them up at Walmart when you're going through the checkout lane. They're just everywhere now. If you've got a USB drive that's like, 32 megabytes, it's probably really old. You should get rid of it soon. They go bad. Moisture and just time and wear and tear, and the chips, they just get old and they go bad. If you've got a USB drive that's more than like maybe 10 years old, I would say it's time to replace that. They're really, really cheap to replace. But if you're relying on that to have your storage of your data, if your computer goes bad, it's not a good thing. I would replace it. I would say 10 years would be the max that I would hold a USB drive around. So just so you know. If you're not testing your backup, you don't have a backup. Yeah, we get this a lot. So You might be like, oh, I'm backing up onto my external. We get this all the time from residential sites. No, I've got an external drive. I'm backing up constantly. And then we look, and the external drive is totally not even either turning on, like it's not even turning on. They just assumed it was still working. Or we'll look at the external drive and it's failing, like it has errors. All of the backups are failing, but no one ever looked at it. So if you've got a backup solution, a really good thing to do is either to be going into it and see, yes, it's successfully backing up. If it's an online backup, you want to get an email every once in a while saying, yes, this is working. You don't only want to get an email to say, no, this isn't working, because if you get no email, it just might not be working. You know, it's like the newsletter email. Not getting a newsletter email doesn't mean there's not a newsletter. It could mean that it's not getting to you. So not getting your backup's having a problem does not mean that the backup's all okay. It could just mean something's not working right with it getting communication to you. You want to have communication, or you want to be able to see logs on a regular basis that are telling you, yes, this is working. If your computer blows up one day, that minute or two for you to look at that once a month is really not going to be, you'll thank yourself for having done that. When is the last time you backed up your contacts calendar? Oh, so I don't know what the ratio is here, but a lot of us we have our contacts in our phone, and they just synchronize magically to Google or to Apple or whatever, and they're now magically on our other device. Or maybe you use, Yahoo Mail or AOL Mail or whatever the mail client is that you use, and they've got all your contacts in there. It's no problem. Or your calendar's all in there, or your calendar's all on your phone. It's not a bad idea to back that up. Usually what you can do, depending on where your contacts and calendar is, so very generically, you can usually go to the website that has that, whether it's the Apple website or whether it's the Google website or the AOL or the Yahoo or whatever it is that you're doing all that stuff through. And you can just go in your contacts and you can say, I want to export all my contacts. And they'll give you a little baby file that'll download on your computer. And now you've got all those there. If you're doing calendar stuff that's synchronizing online, and really the only place it is, well, Google has it. They just make it happen on all my devices. It's not a bad idea to back that up, because these people have been known to mess things up sometimes, and suddenly all your contacts are gone. And getting a hold of Google on the phone is not going to happen. You can write them a little nastygram email. I'm really mad at you, Google. You lost all my clients or my contacts. But they're not going to care. They're not going to write you back anything. They'll say, well, sorry. So if these are important things to you, just like anything else, right? We were talking about how important that Word document is to you, or that picture. If your contacts that you have or your calendar that you have is important to you, don't just rely on Google or Yahoo or AOL or Apple to hold on to that safe copy of that. They're probably going to, but it happens with clients that they'll log into something and suddenly everything's gone because it got hacked. A hacker went in there, send an email out to all their contacts saying, send money to Nigeria for me. Or, I broke my ankle in the UK, please wire me some money, the hospital won't take care of me. And after they do that, they delete all your contacts. And the reason they delete all your contacts is so that you don't go in there and then send an email to all your contacts saying, please don't pay attention to the last email that you got from me. So then you don't know who your contacts are to let them know that the last email that came from you was bad. So it's not a bad idea to back that stuff up. Just some food for thought. I think we're to the question part of the meeting. So if anyone has any questions? Yes, sir.
Wait a minute. I'm coming up.
Wait.
Oh, we're waiting for the mic.
Why did you not include Dropbox in the list of cloud storage?
You mean in the list of like where Carbonite Mosey and stuff was?
Yeah.
Because Dropbox is not a backup. There's Dropbox itself, and they'll say on their website, they'll say, we are not a backup provider. We are a synchronization provider, a cloud synchronization provider. And so OneDrive would say the same thing. iCloud Drive would say the same thing. I'm trying to think who else does that stuff. There's a couple other things that they are concerned with synchronizing your stuff between devices. They're not concerned with keeping versions, even though some of them do. And they're not good at going backwards in time, which some of them do. But they've been very careful to say we're not a backup provider. It's probably more of a liability thing where they don't want to be responsible for all your stuff. They'll say, oh, well, you should have had a backup because we're not a backup. But there is a difference. There's a difference between getting a backup that gets off and is there between Dropbox things. So a good example is this. If you have a crypto virus that hits you, all of your files will be encrypted, including all your Dropbox files will be encrypted. And then Dropbox starts synchronizing all of those encrypted files onto Dropbox and deletes all your other files off of Dropbox. And so what happens is that for the normal person now to get back to the way that it was can be quite hard to do for them. And then all of that stuff gets synchronized to all your other computers. Now all your computers have lost all of their data that was in Dropbox, and all they have is encrypted files to move away. And so, because they're really good at synchronizing stuff, including, encrypted files. And so they have very similar properties, and there are people that use them that way, but it's something that you wouldn't want to rely on as your only type of backup, I guess is my point.
My question is about the time machine. You mentioned that if for any reason you get the virus on the Apple and it went to your time machine, would you just unplug the time machine and replace the whole time machine, or how would you get rid of that virus if it went onto the time machine?
Well, if you got a virus, if it was just a normal virus that infected the time machine, and maybe it got like one of the virus files down the time machine, you would use Time Machine to go. Time Machine is the thing. It's the reason it's called Time Machine is there's basically like you pick it and you can be like, I'm going to go back in time to the way that all my files were yesterday, or the day before, or a week ago, or a month ago, depending on how big the drive is. The problem is that if you get the new viruses out are not about, oh, I infected their files, haha. They want to make money now, and so what they do is that the virus installs and encrypts all your files on your computer, and then it pops up a message saying, hey, I've encrypted all your files. If you want them back, pay me money, and I will unencrypt them for you. And so the problem is that if you have a time machine drive plugged in, they're just going to encrypt that all. So you can't go backwards from that, which is the problem, unless you're unplugging it, maybe. And so then if you get a virus, you would want to clean the machine, make sure there's no virus on your machine, then plug back in the time machine, and then roll back to a time that you didn't have the virus. But if it happened to be plugged in when the virus hits, that whole backup, that you had, could be completely junk. It could be completely encrypted, and so the whole point of it is then out the door. Does that answer your question?
Well, then you buy a new time machine.
Then you wouldn't. You could, it's not ruining the drive physically, it's only ruining the data that's on the drive. And so you would then probably delete all that data off because it's all junk unless you want to pay the ransom and then you get it back. But then you delete it all and you'd start again fresh with doing Time Machine on the same device again.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Last question.
Last question.
I backed up everything on the external hard drive, which went corrupt. All my pictures that I have, all my life was on there. Now, I had to send it in to have it, recovered.
Mm-hmm.
Paid almost $1,000 for it.
Yep, that's about the price, usually $900 to $1,200.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now they put it on another external hard drive.
Yes.
I thought I'd back it up. So now it's backed up in Dropbox, but you said it's not really a backup. So where do you back up?
Well, you have it in two places now, and so I want to take a quick second away from your question real quick to make a point. This is another thing that we run into a lot is that people say, I've got a backup, I've got everything on my external drive, but they literally mean they have everything only on an external drive. They don't have it on their machine. They think that external drive is just a backup. That's not a backup because it didn't follow our 3-2-1. You've only got one copy on an external drive. That's your point of failure right there. And so I just want to make that point. But to your point, so you've got it on an external drive and you've got it in Dropbox. Do you also have it on your computer?
Yeah, no, my whole photo library went down to the external.
Yeah, so what I would do possibly would be to, you've got it on there, you've got it in Dropbox, so you got it in two places. One of them is offsite. And so a third place, bring it onto your computer too. And that way if your external drive fails, you've got it on Dropbox and on your computer. If Dropbox fails, you've got an external drive in the computer, so then you've got your redundancy then.
So I have to put it back into my computer, so it's also in iCloud, it's not in the computer.
I would recommend that you copy it back into your computer. If you want, I can talk to you about it a little bit further after we finish if you want more specific directions. But yeah, that's what I would do in that scenario generically, is get it back on your computer, then that way you've got it in three places.
Okay, I think we'll call it quits on the questions. We'll be up in the front. If anybody has any questions, they can come on up.
If there are any questions about communications, come and see me after the meeting closes, okay? Thank you.
Hold this up, Mr. John? Okay.